enormously privileged to have as our presenter today, Dr. Oliver Mutanga, who is a graduate, in fact, of our program, one of the first of our graduates here at the Free State. Subsequent to that, he's done all kinds of things. He describes himself as a critical diversity scholar working on issues of health, education, disability, and Ubuntu philosophy. He's currently assistant professor at the Graduate School of Education in Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. He's also research associated at Associated University of South Africa's College of Education. He's worked in many different places. He's worked in the UK. He worked and continues to work as an expert reviewer for the EU Commission. He's been the recipient of a prestigious Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship in Oslo, and has been the recipient of various competitive research grants. And as a relatively young scholar, he is widely published in the fields that are in which he's interested. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome you and to be able to welcome you in person to very cold Bloemfontein. And then the discussant for the paper is Dr. Carmen Martinez Vargas. She also did her PhD with us a bit later than Oliver did. And she is currently lecturer in social justice and education at the University of Lancaster. Her interests also span higher education, Ubuntu philosophy, and decoloniality, decolonization, and participatory research, and is the author of a very well-received book published a few years ago, Open Access, and coming out of her PhD, and I'd strongly recommend it to anybody interested in the range of these issues. So you have up to about 40 minutes, and then Carmen will respond, and we will then open it up to questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Does somebody have a timer? Oh, I've got a watch.
Okay.
Okay, it's over to you, Oliver.
Thank you so much, Professor Melan, and thank you for the invitation and inviting me again to this wonderful group. And thank you, Lucretia, for organizing all my travel. So, yes, today I'll be sharing with you some of the ideas that I have put in my paper on public and private good, and bringing in the Ubuntu philosophy into that discussion. Unfortunately, I'm not using PowerPoint again today. I have some notes that I'll be reading out so that I keep to my time. Thanks also to colleagues who have joined us online. I can see Dr. Khalid, my own PhD student, Nyawano, is a PhD student at UCT. I can see also Dr. Peshen and Edward there. Thank you so much.
And John is with us.
And John, yeah. I hope you are surviving the coldness. It's summer in Glasgow. It's not. Summer. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining. I hope we will learn together in this discussion. I'm open to your views. This is not the end of this discussion on public-private good. I think the conversations will go on, but I have my own views, which I'll share with you today. So, as I have said yesterday, I'm not someone who is really so much keen on binaries. And this paper that I wrote was a reflection of that. I have presented this paper at Lancaster at the invitation of Carmen and the group, and also at UCL. So I have tried to revisit some of my ideas based on what has also been written even after I had wrote this paper. So I'll be discussing that as well. So to start off this presentation, I'll just read part of a chapter. I'll just read a few paragraphs from this book called The Polygamist. It's not the one that you know. No, it's not The Polygamist that is on Netflix at the moment. This one was written, I think it was around 1976 by Ndabanini Stole, who was a Zimbabwean politician. I think he's the first, one of the first nationalist people in Zimbabwe. So the background to his novel really it's a struggle between the traditional Zimbabwean family and the modern issues. So they are caught in between the transition. The father is a polygamist, and the son has gone to a missionary school. He is now educated. But where I'm reading now, it's a setting that is happening in a rural village. They are trying a case. So the reason why I'm reading this is it plays out really well to distinguish between what we might call the private life and the public life. How do we distinguish the two? So I'll read it. So they are at traditional court, and let me start here. Yeah. The case before us is of a very serious nature. He continued. Even the one we have tried this morning was not so serious. This one we tried the one that we tried this morning was against a person, but this one is against the people. Indeed, thundered the court. The one we tried this morning was a crime against Musipa, but this one is a crime against the people. It breaks the custom of the people. It threatens everyone. If this evil is allowed to go on unpunished severely, we shall have poisoned ourselves. That is quite clear. The son of Matutu is only a child, and therefore this court cannot order him to pay many heads of cattle to his own father. He paused, then stood up. Mulawa, he called, bring my reins. The reins were duly brought to him, and holding them in his hand, he began. You see these reins? We use them to tie the cattle, the beast. We don't use them to tie human beings. We tie wild animals, not human beings. I'm going to tie you these reins because you have ceased to be a human being. You have become a wild animal. A wild animal has no custom. You have no custom, and therefore you are a wild animal. You have no custom, and therefore you are a wild animal. A wild animal goes on its mother, and you go on your mother. You have been true to a wild animal. We cannot live with our wild animals in our homes. Tie him up to that tree. Now, continued Mlochwa, holding up a short rein whip. We use this to tame wild animals. We don't use this on human beings. But today, we will use it on our own son, who has become an animal. We want to bring him back to ourselves. Mulawa, Chaya, Mulawa administered the corporal punishment, and the son of Matutu sent shrieks of pain to the heavens. He appealed for mercy, promising that he would never do a thing like that. Chaya, cried Mlochwa, the wild animal in you must depart. Mulawa beat him all the harder. Now leave him, Mulawa ordered Mlochwa. Mulawa stopped. Untie him from the tree, ordered Mlochwa. Mulawa did so. Now, son of Matutu, promise this court that you will never commit a crime of that kind or in your life. I do, my fathers. I do. I do. Now it is all over. We shall never again hold this against you. It's finished. It's finished. Thank you, my fathers. Thank you. The son of Matutu was in tears. Now, said Mlochwa, I must come to the case of Mamsipa. I must make this quite clear to you, Mamsipa, that according to our custom, you have also behaved like a wild animal. The wild animals do not have customs. A wild animal will allow its own son to make love to it, and you have allowed your son to make love to you. You have disgraced the people of the Musipa clan. So this is the setting. The son was having an affair with one of his father's wives, the last wife to his father, and here he's being punished. So in modern societies, I say this is a private issue. This affair between him and his stepmom is a private issue. But the way it's treated in this community is treated as a public issue, treated as a community issue. And they say if it's not dealt with, it is going to poison the whole society and to be beaten in front of everyone. So that's where I'm coming from in my paper. So the title of my paper is Ubuntu Beyond the Public and the Private Good, Ubuntu Shared Good and the Politics of Belonging. So the main two questions that I think you need to question if proceed is who is the public?
I'm talking to you and listening to them.
And the other question is who is permitted to belong? So firstly, I want to make to begin with not with a definition of I don't want to define what is public or what is private, but just to start with the disturbance that we have a phrase in higher education that we often hear in terms of higher education policy and scholarship, and the phrase is that higher education is either a public good or a private good. So my claim today is that this phrase is analytically convenient, yes, but morally and politically it is very, very expensive. And I will highlight why I say it's very expensive. The reason why I say it's expensive, one, is that it trains us to misrecognize what education is. In other words, it trains us not to appreciate the role of education. Then secondly, it also trains us to misrecognize one another. Who are we as human beings? So I want to make a claim, a very sharp claim that the public-private binary is not only a description. I think now it is becoming a discipline that teaches us separability. It teaches us to imagine that an individual can be understood before the community, that achievement can be separated from history, that knowledge can be separated from the conditions that make knowing possible, and that belonging can be separated from justice. So, and this separability is not innocent at all. It is one of the most powerful social technologies of modernity. It sorts whose lives count, whose knowledge counts, whose fees count, whose citizenship counts, and whose suffering can be treated as background noise. So I think Lucretia shared with you another ebook, the Burnout from Humans. One of the commentators captures a deep danger when he warns us that when he warns about systems that thrive on forgetting and persuading us to make destructive separation of progress. So that warning is not only ecological, it's also educational. So universities too can become systems of forgetting land, forgetting labor, forgetting language, debt, migration, coloniality, and the relationships that make knowledge possible. I wanted to make an experiment with you, but you can do it later on your own. But just imagine if I ask you right now to say, complete a sentence like which says, my education is mine because. Will you be able to do that? And what will be your answer? If you just to say, complete this phrase, my education is mine because, then you give the answers, if you can do that. And also another sentence which you might want to feel complete is, my education is ours because. Then you can also complete that. So wherever I have posed these questions, in the end, we have discovered that it's very, very difficult, especially the first one, because it cannot be only yours. So there are tensions there within these two questions or these sentences. And if you feel those tensions, when you were trying to comprehend or answer them, then it's good, because that tension is what this session is all about, or what my presentation is all about. So before I go deeper into the discussion, let me just say why what we are discussing matters, and why it matters at this university and why it matters in South Africa at the moment. So I'm here at the University of the Free State, an institution that cannot be understood outside the sedimented privileges and wounds of South African higher education. Like many formerly privileged institutions, the UFS carries the afterlives of apartheid in language, residence life, curriculum, institutional memory, and the ordinary rituals through which some people are made to feel at home, while others are made to feel provisionally not at home. This does not make the UF exceptional. It makes UFS a revealing site. A university is never only a campus. It is a moral weather campus. It is a moral weather system. It teaches people how to breathe, who may speak without translating themselves, and who must first prove that they belong and that they are worthy. And let me also locate myself in this institution. I did my PhD at this university through the South African government-funded scholarship, even though I was or I'm not a South African. So I do not speak about the public good from a distance. My own academic life was shaped by a public investment that crossed the line of citizenship. That experience already unsettles the public-private binary. What looked like national public spending became transnational scholarship formation, personal transformation, institutional contribution, family mobility, and a debt of responsibility that can never be priced, cannot be priced. So when I ask who belongs to the public, I ask from inside a history that taught me that public is never only legal, territorial, or national. It is also relational, ethical, and intergenerational. The national moment also matters in South Africa. As most of us know, across South Africa, anti-migrant sentiments and xenophobic violence have made the question of belonging painfully visible again. In such a moment, the public-private debate cannot remain abstract. It becomes a question about who is counted as part of the public. It becomes a question about who is allowed to share in the commons of learning, dignity, and future possibility. So I'll keep on returning to one question: who is included in we and who is pushed outside? With that context in view, let me name my argument of this talk. My argument is that the public-private good debates in higher education is shaped by an ontology of separability. It assumes that individuals' benefit and collective benefit can be. It assumes that individual benefit and collective benefit can be separated, measured, priced, and governed as different kinds of goods. This assumption is especially powerful in neoliberal policy regimes, where higher education is increasingly framed as private investment, employability, mobility, and positional advantage. I do not deny that higher education has private benefits. It often does. Nor do I deny that higher education has public benefits. It certainly does. My argument is that these categories become misleading when they are treated as ontologically separate. And as will be shown later, Ubuntu philosophy allows us to ask a deeper question. What if education or educational value is produced relationally? What if the good of higher education is not public plus private, but a shared one? What if the university is neither a market store nor a state warehouse, but a relational institute that binds persons, communities, histories, ecologies, and future generations? To get there, we first need to understand how the binary was built, how the public-private binary was built, and why it is so persuasive. So, in the technical economic tradition, a public good is usually defined through two main concepts, that is non-rivalry and non-exploitability, following Samuelson's paper. So non-rivalry means that a person's use does not reduce another person's use. And non-exploitability, it means that it is difficult to exclude people from benefiting. So the problem then is that higher education does not neatly fit in this category. It can be excludable through fees, admissions, language, geography, disability, race, citizenship, and other social closures. Yet it also produces forms of value that exceed the individual graduate. For example, knowledge, professional judgment, civic participation, public reasoning, social repair, and intergenerational aspiration. So this is why the binary is attractive. It offers the appearance of clarity in a world of entanglement. It gives policymakers a language justifying fees. It gives markets a language of claiming freedom. And it gives the state a language of treating a language of retreating without appearing to abandon its responsibilities. So now I invite Rose. I think Rose wrote a book called Disobey. Although he was not writing about higher education, he warns us about obedience produced when the political decisions are presented as anonymous calculations in unavoidable reality. So in universities, then this takes a familiar form. Tuition becomes inevitable. Debt becomes a responsibility. Rankings become a reality. Budget ceilings become moral instruction. And then we are told figures are just figures. But figures are never just figures. They are choices wearing a lab coat. Now that I have shown how the binary works as a language of policy and obedience, I want to complicate the map further. In my paper, I talk of global north, global south, or the north and south. And I argue that the global north, global south distinction also remains useful, but it's insufficient. There are many norths within the south, and there are many south within the north. In South Africa, we all know that historically white privilege universities have often functioned as north within the south. Their privilege is not simply financial. It is epistemic, symbolic, linguistic, infrastructural, and affective. This matters because the public-private debate does not land on a flat surface. It lands on a landscape already shaped by colonial extraction, apartheid allocation, and post-apartheid inequality. When such a landscape is called a market, historical advantage becomes talent. When such a landscape is called choice, inherited exclusion becomes preference. When such a landscape is called excellence, unequal starting points disappear behind polished metrics. This brings us to one of the most powerful stories used to justify market solutions. That is the tragedy of the commons. It's well known in development studies, and it was coined by Garrett Hardin. So the story is simple. The tragedy of the commons. It goes by like a shared pasture is open to all. Each header adds one more animal. The individual gain is immediate, but the collective cost is distributed. And when that happens, the pasture collapses. So they say when something is shared communally, a tragedy is most likely to fall. The moral seems obvious. Shared resources invite free riding, overuse, and ultimately ruin. The policy implications also seem obvious. Regulate from above or privatize. But Illinois Ostrom taught us to mistrust the simplicity of that lesson, or that many commons do not collapse because they are shared. They collapse when the social rules, institutions, trust, monitoring, and reciprocal obligations that sustain sharing are destroyed or ignored. This distinction is crucial for higher education. When a public university is underfunded, overcrowded, and forced into survival entrepreneurship, is that a tragedy of the commons, or it is a tragedy of political choice? When historically advantaged institutions accumulate symbolic and material capital, all historically disadvantaged institutions are asked to compete in the same rankings race. Is that a market? Or it is a memory failure organized as policy. There is another tragedy we must name. It is not the tragedy of the commons, but it is the tragedy of enclosure. It occurs when what should be held in common is fenced, priced, ranked, branded, and turned into positional advantage. And in South Africa today, we must also name the tragedy of privatized belonging. Xenophobia is in part the attempted privatization of belonging. It says the public is ours, not yours. It says safety is ours and not yours. And it says dignity is ours and not yours. So here is the question for the universities. If we accept too easily that education can be divided into private and public returns, do we also become comfortable with treating other human beings as externalities? Now that we have seen how this binary can become an economic language and a moral boundary, I now want to organize the literature as provisional taxonomy for these under these 4 strands. So the first one is the classificatory strand that sees higher education as an impure good. So in this strand, it begins with technical classification of goods, where Stanson gives us the strict economic grammar of public goods, non-rival and non-exploitability. So on this view, higher education is not a pure public good because seats are limited, access can be restricted, and credentials can be used competitively. So this trend is powerful because it names something real. Degrees do not bring private advantage. They can raise earnings, status, mobility, and access to professions. But the weakness is equally clear. If education is framed mainly as private investment, inequality becomes an individual funding problem rather than a social justice problem. The poor are invited to buy their way out of historically produced disadvantage. That is not emancipation. It is monetization of hope. Then we have the other strand, the public good strand. Higher education is democracy, citizenship, equality, and repair. This strand says that education must be judged by its democratic and social purposes. Whitman asks, what a democratic society owes its members through education. And we have people like Apple and Bell, who warns that market reforms do not simply introduce efficiency, they reorganize power, culture, governance, and inequality. Then I think the recent paper by Professor Melanie and was it with Sandra? Yeah, is also equally important. And reading through your other works on capabilities and professional education, public good, and higher education as a repair project. So you actually, if I read all that work, you refuse to reduce the university to private earnings or state service. So your work, I think, is really making important contribution in refusing to reduce university to that. Then we also have people like Sein and Newsbaum, whose work on capabilities shifts the evaluative framework from what university possesses to what people are actually able to do and to be. Then, your other paper with Sandra, where you have helped to reimagine a university through human development and the capabilities approach by shifting attention from institutional prestige to what university enable people and societies to become. So at UFS, these questions are not rhetoric, because this university was shaped or is shaped by privilege, and this cannot be. We cannot speak of public good without speaking of repair. Then maybe quickly going. Yeah. So again, I think one of our colleagues, Sam Ofongwa, did another contribution on the public and private good through his work on black text to unsettle the private-public distinction. So what appears as private graduate income is already socially claimed through supporting families. So the graduate is not an isolated rational actor maximizing private return. The graduate is often a node in a wider moral economy of repair, responsibility, kinship, expectation, and sometimes exhaustion. So black text for Fongwa may be experienced as a burden, love, obligation, exploitation, solidarity, and all of these at once. So conceptually, it breaks the neat line between public and private good. So my own argument, I'm not trying to simply add a fifth strand, but I'm trying to ask whether these four strands share a deeper. So what I'm trying to come up with is that the four strands that I've discussed, they all share an assumption that individual and collective goods are separable in the first place. This is why I turn to Ubuntu and the shared good, not as another item in the taxonomy, but as a disruption of the grammar that makes the taxonomy necessary. So I'm now going to Ubuntu. Yeah, so Ubuntu in general, I don't want to put Ubuntu as a lecture here, but it insists that persons are constituted through relations, and it rejects the funders of the self as already complete, already separate, already sovereign. So a person becomes a person through other persons, and in richer accounts of Ubuntu, through relations with ancestors, land, ecology, and future generations. Ubuntu is not just simply a kindness after a kindness of some sort. It is a pathway of becoming human through relations, obligations, memory, land, and community. There's a book, I think it's an open access book again, by Christina Kessler. It's called My Great Grandmother's Scout, which offers a useful image for this point. In this story, a Sudanese village embraces modern water pump and begins to forget older practices, storing water in baobab trees. When rain fails and pump breaks, the old practice becomes the life-saving again. So the moral lesson is not that the old must defeat the new. The lesson is modern systems become dangerous when they train us to forget older ecologies of care. Perhaps universities need to take some lessons here. The question is not whether we choose to pump or we choose the pump or the gout in case of this story, but the question is whether we can build institutions wise enough to hold both technology and memory, innovation and obligation, knowledge and care. Walker Bonney and Somerville's recent work also helps name this as an issue of ecological, ontological design. Universities are not only organizations with policies, they are institutions that design ways of being. Their account of neoliberal capability, well-being, and Ubuntu ontological design gives us a vocabulary for asking what kind of person, what kind of society, what kind of ecology does the university design, or is a university designing? So this resonates with Dovugachev's argument that epistemic freedom is part of the unfinished work of decolonization. Maybe, am I still okay with time?
Yes.
Okay.
Plenty.
Okay.
25 or 20.
So it's, yeah. So this matters for higher education because the university is the one of the institutions through which personhood is recognized, disciplined, expanded, or wounded. The university does not simply deliver knowledge. It authorizes some form of knowledge and humiliates others. It grants some people ease and others endurance. It gives some students the gift of intellectual confidence and others the burden of permanent self-translation. This is why I use the language of shared good. Shared good is not a polite compromise between the public good or private good. It's not the middle ground. It is not 50% public or 50% private. It is not a mixed funding formula disguised as a philosophy. Shared good names an ontological claim. Educational value is co-produced through relationships. Its benefits are interdependent. Its harms are also interdependent. Its obligations extend across persons, communities, institutions, ecologies, and generations. So the question is not only who pays, the question is also who made this knowledge possible, who is recognized by it, is erased by it, who is repaid by it, who is asked to carry its costs, and who is permitted to belong to the future it promises. This is where the UFS context returns. If institutional culture is the moral atmosphere in which personhood is recognized or refused, then transformation cannot be reduced to numbers. Without access, without belonging is not transformation. Diversity without epistemic change is decoration. Excellence without repair is refined avoidance. And this is where the xenophobic movement returns. The xenophobic moment. A university that speaks Ubuntu while remaining silent about anti-migrant violence has misunderstood Ubuntu. A university that speaks public good while allowing belonging to be privatized has misunderstood public good. A university that speaks decolonization while reproducing epistemic and social exclusion has misunderstood decolonization. Now that Ubuntu has shifted the grammar of the debate, I want to lay the argument in three institutional demands. The first is that shared good requires shared governance. This means participatory and community accountable decision-making that resists both market capture and state capture. It asks who sits in the room when the future of the university is being decided. Second, shared good requires shared responsibility funding. This does not mean asking the poor to finance the public good through debt. It means designing funding arrangements around reciprocity, redress, and intergenerational obligation. Third, shared good requires shared success matrix. If rankings reward insulation, extraction, and prestige, then rankings cannot be the moral compass. We need metrics that value epistemic justice, inclusion, democratic capabilities, ecological responsibility, and social repair. Let me close with one sentence. We cannot decolonize knowledge while privatizing belonging. That's all. Thank you so much. Discussions.
Thanks very much, Oliver. Wow, that's a lot of food for thought there. Carmen, do you want to have a go at responding first?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Oliver, for writing the timely and much needed paper and for this presentation that goes along with today. I'm delighted to be here today to discuss your ideas. So thank you for the opportunity. I must admit that it is challenging to engage critically with the paper and your ideas today, because largely I found myself in substantial agreement with its central arguments. So it's kind of difficult to critique something that you substantially agree with. So rather what I'm going to do is to offer in sorry. So rather than offering a critique in the traditional sense, what I will begin by summarizing what I see as the paper's main contributions and the key ideas I have taken from it. And I will then highlight a few points that I hope can extend the conversation before concluding with some questions to open up the discussion. So it's going to be a mix between the paper and the presentation today. So the central aim of this paper is, as we have seen, as we have heard from Oliver's presentation, to challenge a long-standing debate in Western higher education, whether universities will be understood primarily as a public good or a private good. Oliver argues that this binary framing is too limited, and he proposes an alternative way of thinking grounded in Ubuntu philosophy, emphasizing its interconnectedness and shared humanity. And it's true that Western higher education is often described in two opposing ways, as he has argued. On one side, we have the idea of higher education as a private good. And from this perspective, individuals go to university mainly to improve their own life chances. They gain skills, credentials, and networks that lead to higher income and better employment opportunities. And because the benefits are largely individual, students are often expected to bear a significant share of the cost through tuition fees. On the other side, higher education is described as a public good. Here, the emphasis is on societal benefits. University produce research, support innovation, strengthen democratic participation, improve health outcomes, and contribute to social cohesion. From this perspective, higher education should be publicly funded because society as a whole benefits. So the problem, as Oliver argues, is that this binary framing creates tension in policy debates. If higher education is treated only as a private good, it risks becoming overly marketized and unequal. But if it's treated only as a public good, it may ignore the very real private benefits individuals receive. So this distinction is misleading because it assumes that private and public benefits are separate and competing categories. Instead, you argue, and I think I agree very much with that they are deeply interconnected. This is where Ubuntu philosophy becomes central, and how Oliver uses this philosophy to reframe higher education as a relational good. In other words, universities do not simply produce private benefits on one side and public benefits on the other. Instead, they generate outcomes that are co-created through relationships between individuals, institutions, and society. So Ubuntu dissolves the sharp separation between public and private benefits by showing that they are mutually constitutive. This argument has important implications for how we think about funding and governing universities, as you have said, and especially in many contemporary policy environments that are influenced by neoliberal thinking, as you mentioned. This is framed in terms of return on investment. So students are treated as consumers, university as service providers, and degrees as financial assets. So this logic tends to prioritize measurable private outcomes, such as graduate salaries and employability rankings. So Oliver's arguments challenge this by suggesting that such a framework is incomplete. It ignores the broader relational value of higher education, such as social cohesion, civic responsibility, ethical formation, and community development. Ubuntu, therefore, provides not just a philosophical critique that will be like the superficial kind of approach to it, but also a normative alternative. It asks us to imagine universities not as competitive marketplaces, but as shared social spaces where individual and collective flourishing are together. Therefore, I think your contributions run in three different areas. The first one, I think, of course, is the introduction of a non-Western philosophical framework into a debate that is often dominated by Western economic thinking. And this is significant because it broadens the intellectual foundations of higher education studies and contributes to the colonial scholarship in many ways. The second one, it challenges the simplicity of the public-private binary. So instead of treating it as a fixed distinction, the paper shows that it is a conceptual construct that may obscure more than it reveals. And the third is that it provides an ethical lens for thinking about education. Rather than focusing only on efficiency and market outcomes, it emphasizes values like solidarity, interdependence, and shared responsibility. But several important questions arise from the paper and today's presentation, which I would like to use to conclude. And some of them are quite boring. So one of the key issues is the operationalization. So in the paper, you discuss a few measures of how this can be done, especially in the African continent. And we know that Ubuntu is a powerful ethical and philosophical idea, but it's less clear how this translates into concrete policy. So for example, what will a funding model based on Ubuntu actually look like in Western countries, not necessarily in the African continent? Will tuition fees still exist? A second issue is the structural constraint. So even if we accept Ubuntu as a guiding philosophy, universities today operate within global systems of competitions, rankings, and marketization that you mentioned. But how easily these structures can be transformed? You know, what are the spaces of negotiation that we have in between to really transform this higher education system given the structural constraint? And an important one is about the universality, and this is coming from kind of post-colonial scholars, because Ubuntu originates in African philosophical traditions rooted in a specific cultural and historical context. While its emphasis on relationality is widely appealing, we might ask whether it can be directly applied in very different educational and political systems without losing meaning. So how an Ubuntu university look like in the UK, for instance, and whether this is possible, feasible, and desirable, in the sense not because Ubuntu is not good enough, but because of respecting the localities and temporalities of the moment. And finally, and as I said, this is a kind of boring one. I have a question about measurement. And especially it's because I'm kind of thinking here from a kind of feasibility or feasible kind of project, envisioning a feasible project towards the future. So modern higher education policies rely heavily on indicators that can be measured, such as graduate salaries, employment rates, or research outputs. So Ubuntu values and relational and social outcomes are much harder to measure. This raises challenges for how such an approach could be integrated into policy framework. So is the capability approach the theoretical solution? And this is a provocation, I think. So once again, thank you very much, Oliver, for this thought-provoking paper and for intellectually challenging us to think beyond Western standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Want a chance to respond to those three questions, or do you want to open it up to the floor and think about them? So, or one, if not all of them, do you want to respond to one or more?
Maybe let me respond first.
Okay.
Maybe I'll combine some of this.
Okay.
Then we open up.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for your critique. I was actually waiting for more difficult questions.
Sorry, they were plain and boring.
Yeah. No, not that they are not important. Yeah, but so I think you asked me about the operationalization. I think they're almost similar questions. How will you operationalize this within the Western universities, or how will this play out in terms of measurement and integrate it in this in systems which so much demand indicators, right? So I think the answer is I will answer all those questions with one response. So if you want to apply the framework that I have suggested, be it in African context or in non-African context, European context, then it cannot work if you are operating within the same framework that I'm critiquing. It cannot. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know any example which I can give. It's like you are suffering from a flu, then we give you a COVID jab. It can't. So for it to work, really systems, actually everything has to change. So if the measurements and the indicators that are so much promoted today, we cannot measure that, we cannot use that as baselines. So in other words, we have to have newer baselines, newer thinking, then apply. In other way, otherwise we'll be just trying to simplify things that cannot be simplified, and the result will not be as we might want. So this, I think, in the languages of those who don't want to change, I would say this needs a radical approach. Yeah. So you cannot just take a piece to want to transform a university in the UK by borrowing a few of what I'm suggesting, while in essence the structure is the same. It cannot work. Yeah. So I think that's what I would say. Then the other one, that this is built on Ubuntu, which is African philosophy. How will it work in other systems like the UK or other Western systems? The values and the issues that within Ubuntu they know no boundary. If people want to apply it, it doesn't matter whether an institution is in Asia, it's in America, it can be applied because the principles are very simple. It's about respect, it's about reciprocity. So that one, it knows no culture, it knows no color, they say. So it cannot be an excuse that this originates in Africa, so it cannot be applied in a different setting. It's all about the willpower to try it, if I may say. Yeah, that's what I think. Okay.
Thanks, Oliver. I'm going to open it up first to the floor. I'm going to keep an eye on time so that in fairness, we can also give people online an opportunity to respond. So we have around 30 minutes. So I'm going to try and divide the time. So I'm going to take 3 questions from the room, and then I'm going to take 3 questions online. And if there's more time left over, we can come back to the room. So Fadzai, anybody else in the room want to ask a question to Judith? Is there a 3rd question? And PK. So Fadzai, Judith, Pikalongzi, in that order, and then Oliver will respond in one go, and then we'll move online.
Thank you so much.
Can you speak up and out for the online people? All of you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for the work that you've done, and I hope it continues. And I really drew a lot. But as I was thinking, and I agree with most of what you're saying, but as I was thinking and reflecting, I read your paper just before I came in.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of the future of criticality in Ubuntu. You correctly show how Ubuntu emphasizes respect, harmony, and consensus. And I'm thinking, building from Nimi's presentation last week, we had on something on academic freedom. I'm wondering, doesn't this conflict with the spirit of critique, dissent, intellectual friction in the university space? This is very important in higher education.
Yeah.
How can the academic project of questioning assumptions be reconciled with a philosophy that values harmony and communal cohesion so tightly? And can a university be both a site of Ubuntu and radical disruption? I think for me, that's where my thoughts are.
Thanks very much, Judith.
Thank you, Oliver, for this presentation. Ubuntu reminds me when my father was still. I like the example that you've given. He used to invite me to the village court where I could go and listen to him and the committee, solving challenges in the village. So the question that I have relates to the aspect of moral justice. From your example, what we see is the son being, the corporal punishment being administered to the son. We didn't hear how the mother was reprimanded, but they committed the crime together.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how the aspect of moral justice play out.
Thanks. Pikalongzi?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, sir. There are many concepts that you spoke of, externalities, repair, shared good, privatization of belonging. There are 2 examples. When there was this thing that happened, I think on the 3rd of June, some were saying Mabambe, some were saying Masbambisana, which is togetherness. In higher education, the education committee speaks of foreign academics that are outspacing South African academics. Based on the concept that you have, or perhaps that I've also spoke about here, the repair project, the issues of privatization of belonging, do you think the issue, which is we're still seeing now, is it an issue of us versus them, or also is this project of repair project that you mentioned, I think it was research by Prof. Walker, is it something that it's still slow in getting recognized, and maybe it's the us versus them? Thank you.
Thank you.
But you,
Thank you for the questions. I'll try to answer them. Maybe I hope I'll do justice to them. So first with Fuzzy, the issues of harmony and how we can reconcile that within institutions. I think Ubuntu doesn't really, it's not under discussions, it's not under debates. Actually, traditionally, when they were doing these courts, discussion in the courts, people would discuss and debate and reach to a consensus. So bringing Ubuntu into a university space where there is critical engagement, where you have to be critical of what's happening, doesn't take away anything, or Ubuntu will not inhibit criticality. Actually, it promotes that. It really promotes that.
What about with the common consensus?
Yes.
So the private,
Yeah.
the individual also, I still see a bit of tension there.
Yeah. So yeah, I do understand views. Yeah, because assuming we are at a communal court, we are discussing something. The majority things are being debated. The majority have taken a stance, but that majority, maybe there are two individuals among the men who have a different view. So you are asking, so what happens to these views of the minority? Unfortunately, in many instances, but in many instances, I think I don't want to conclude, but in some instances, I think the majority wins. But in some instances, I have seen now, I think if you follow YouTube, we are now able to follow court proceedings in Zimbabwe, traditional court proceedings. At times, it's not the decision that is made is not the one that is the majority. At times, people will say, but this one person point is valid. Let's go for this one. So really, it depends how you are doing how you are handling everything. But yeah, there is a danger of majority consensus overriding minority when even the minority have a valid point.
sorry, can we, you can continue the conversation tonight.
Yeah,
Do you want to respond to Judith?
Then Judith, you asked about the morality. So in the book, what really happened was the boy was beaten, right? But the mother, the court said, because you are a married person, we cannot do that to you. We are going to send you to your own people so that they can cancel you. Then you go back to your husband. So that was the decision that was taken. As a court, we cannot embarrass you as a woman in front of everyone. But the boy was beaten. So that was the consensus that was taken there. So every community, I think they have or had their ways of dealing with morality issues or moral issues. Yeah. Then you were asking about the issues that are happening, the us and them. Really, with what's happening in South Africa, I don't want to comment on what really is the issue, where it's coming from. But what I can comment on is what is happening really fine in terms of the way they are trying to resolve whatever issue it is. So I have a problem with the ways in which these things are being handled. It's so sad. It's so sad. I think in one clip I saw a young boy. People were celebrating, the community was celebrating that this boy has joined this march. A young boy, I think barely, not even a teenager. But what kind of a boy are you raising? What kind of a person are you raising by letting this boy join these marches? When he sees someone who is different from him, what will happen next? You see, so we might be talking about. I don't want to really dwell on the issues there, but whether it's us or them, or whether there are some things underlying, but the bottom line is it's bad what is happening. I told you yesterday that if you want to understand the repercussions of this, you only have to visit Rwanda to see the ills of such actions. Yeah.
Thanks, Oliver. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll be polite and wait. Okay, we're going to turn to the online. Caroline Onyango has her hand up. I can't want to comment. No, Tiffany want to comment. And Tiffany. So Caroline, Tiffany, is there a third person who wants to comment?
Thank you very much, Oliver, and the coordinators and the great team I see there. I've been following online from Kenya. I really like your argument, and I agree wholly with you. But I'm just curious, Oliver, how would such a philosophy operate in meritocracy that we currently abide by in the current system, Western systems? How would you go about upward mobility of the academic staff, or even the students themselves, if we were to adopt such an ideal philosophy? I'm curious. Pardon me if I missed the argument, but I'm just curious about meritocracy within that ideal system of shared public and private good in education. Kindly comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Can we take Tiffany's question? And I see and Timmy has his hand up as well. So we're going to take that round of three. So Tiffany, it's up to you if you can switch off your mic. You want to switch on your camera, that would be great, but at least switch off your mic. Are you ready?
Thank you very much. Mine was just a comment on the issue of the incorporation of Ubuntu, or the operationalization of Ubuntu within our context. And it was kind of agreeing with what Oliver had responded to say it's the only way that this can work or it can be operationalized is if we change our mindset. So we've been we've been acclimatized to this kind of mindset that thinks liberalism, or it thinks in the Western way of thinking. But then what will happen is I use the new wine and new wine skin approach to say, unless the mindsets change, this philosophy wouldn't change. If you want to operationalize it, it will have to require a proper change of mind to adopt this kind of thinking. So that was the comment. But thank you very much, Prof. Oliver, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Intimi, do you want to give us your question, and then Oliver will respond?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And it's good to see my colleagues. And Oliver, I enjoyed your talk. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed your talk, and it reminded me a lot after being away from the center for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. Now, when you're talking, Oliver, I was trying to look at how to link that talk to my own institution where I'm working. and looking at the possibilities of some of those conversations, some of those issues in practice. How do we shift the thinking in a system which is so so complex, which was built in a particular way in terms of pedagogy issues, in terms of institutional culture, which is so, I'm looking for a word here, which is so it doesn't allow things like freedom. You know, you go to class, the students are so scared of a lecturer, for instance, and that's a pattern. There's no connection. There's disconnect between the student and lecturers. There's that which is part of institutional culture, and it's so entrenched. Then how do we then begin to cultivate some of those ideals of Ubuntu, of of one being connected to community, and one seeing that my education is not about me, it's about also others, it's about also community, it's about the broader society. How do we move away from that? And I'm sure what I'm talking about is similar to Zimbabwe, possibly, because for me, my experience has been very, very troubling me so far. So how do we, in practice, in reality, in a system which is so entrenched in terms of, alienating students? Students are just there to get their papers, not there for learning. Yeah. My question now is all over the place, but maybe I'll get some thoughts from you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Oliver.
Thank you, Timmy, and thank you, Tiffany, for the comments, and Caroline for your question. So let me start with Caroline. I think some of the I think I had responded to similar question. So when you asked about how can what I'm suggesting work when we have this meritocracy system, and I think Tiffany highlighted some of my argument that we cannot operate on the same plane if we want it to work. It cannot. So if we bring in what I'm proposing to meritocracy in higher education, it cannot work alongside what is existing at the moment. Rather, we need to redefine what we have to value in terms of what will be our merit, or what will we put as important or values. So in essence, it cannot work alongside the current system, but we can start to redefine what we value within higher education. Maybe that will be better. Then Timmy, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not naive of the fact that it's very, very difficult to implement some of these changes, some of what I suggest, especially if you are just an ordinary faculty member. You are not in a position of power. It's very difficult. So what are our options? Firstly, I don't know in Tanzania, but I know in Zimbabwe that the relationship between a lecturer and students is something that is of concern to me, because some lecturers don't want to be called by their names in Zimbabwe. They will insist on being called the professor so and so. So what does that do to the relationship between them and the students? I think it creates this hierarchy, which is not necessary. So it's also about our own individual initiatives as faculty members. How are we doing the small things we can do in our classes I think there are many things that we can do in our classes that can change the ways in which our students see us. And again, whichever courses we are teaching, how are we teaching students? What values are we inculcating in them? So that one day these students will also be in positions of power. Maybe they will be the ones who are going to change the status quo. So in smaller ways in our classes, as faculty members, we can do something. I think that will be my response. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. I mean, I want to ask something, but is there anybody else in the room who got a little bit of time? To me and then me. Okay.
No, I think you've my question, but I'm still going to push it back a little bit because the philosophy is not going to work under the current conditions. You have accepted that. Under neoliberal systems, meritocracy, it's not going to work. My question now is, what are some of the 3 trigger points to initiate change? You've already mentioned the small tokens of appreciation, maybe letting your students call you by your name, doing your own personal work. But what are some of the systemic trigger points that can induce a change to get to a particular point? I'm not asking you about that point, but what are some of the trigger points?
Can I add to that, because it's kind of similar, because it does come back to this issue of a theory of change and a change process. So, but I want to say first that I really, really like this conceptualization of a shared good, and I wouldn't like us to lose this in our concern for how do we actually bring it about. I think it's a really compelling concept, and I hope that people will find ways to work with it and to push your work on as well. So thank you very, very much for that. So it's building on what others have said and Tumi has said. I mean, you made clear that the system has to change. So what we're actually looking at is a radical approach and radical change. But we also, various people are saying, but it's not possible because we sit with the system, which is really rather difficult to turn around. And I wondered if we shouldn't also, apart from theorizing change and how whoever we draw on to think about that, if we can't already think about the spaces in which we can already find evidence, or where we can already find an understanding of higher education as a shared good. So, for example, I think we will find that kind of understanding amongst many, many students in our universities. I don't think they're operating with this private-public divide. I think they do understand higher education as a shared good, with their families and with their communities. So there's spaces in which this shared good discourse is actually emergent. I mean, that's just one space. There will be others as well. So a positive thing would be, instead of saying, well, how are we going to do this? Actually look for spaces where we can already find evidence of a shared good at work in higher education, and then work on that and work from that and push and look for the trigger points and so on. But I just want to end, by reiterating that I think it's a compelling concept, and I do hope that others, me included, will work with it. So if you could respond, and then we will close. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah, I will just respond combined. So yes, it's the space we are working in is very challenging. No matter where you are, whether you are working in a European setup or whether you are working in Asia or whether you're in an African setting, it's almost like the higher education is taking a similar route. The only differences might be aggressiveness in which other spaces are or other institutions are going. So yeah, I can't say, these are the trigger points, I don't want to operate as I know it all and I have the solutions to everything. No, that's not me. That's why I said to Jimmy, the only the thing that I could understand and I have also tried and I try to do is if I cannot change the institutional culture, I try to do something within the space that I control, which is my class with my students. There might be others, but this is really what I know. At times I do try to, when I have other entry points are when you have when you are given space in meetings, departmental meetings and so forth. You can say something, although again in these spaces it's also difficult. At times you know that your views are being sought for, but even if you say your views, they will not be taken. So, but should you then say, I'm not going to say out what I think, maybe no. At times, if you are given the opportunity, you continuously also contribute, hoping that one day things will change. But the thing with change, I think there are theories, I think you are right, there are theories of change. So we might also borrow from those ones because change at times it doesn't start as big or it doesn't start with someone. Change starts with an individual. What else? Yeah, so the other entry points that I can think of in South Africa, I think I have read cases where I don't know. Yeah, I think it's UFS and other universities where you hear of cases of students during their vacation. They will go, or on weekends they will go to their different communities where they come from, be it rural or in townships. If they are studying medicine, they'll go there and maybe start to teach others maybe mathematics for free. So that culture, if we celebrate that culture, unfortunately that won't make it on the university webpage. What will come on the university webpage is, like I said yesterday, a student with disability who has been struggling at the university for the past 3 years, he has graduated. They are the ones whose pictures are taken to the website, to the web pages. Yeah, so yeah, maybe some of those smaller things.
Of course, there's nothing wrong in being aspirational and sort of shooting, as it were, aiming for a very different future. On behalf of our group, I just want to thank Oliver again for a very thought-provoking presentation, which I'm sure a lot of us want to go away and really sit with for a bit and think about. To thank Carmen for her provocative and not at all boring response. To thank everybody who joined us online and obviously everybody in the room. And to just remind everybody at 2:00 tomorrow, we are going to have a book launch of the book edited by Oliver and Faith, and everybody is very welcome to join us for that. I think it's going to be another splendid event. So thank you very much, and thank you to everybody. That ends the session. Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye, Edward. Bye. Bye.